Okay, go on through.
Congressional water briefing. All of you know, that's why you're in this room, that water supply is a major concern of our state and of our delegation this year and every year. I want to thank Representative Grace Napolitano for hosting this congressional briefing. Let's say thank you. Representative Napolitano is a leader for Southern California on this pressing issue. She's a champion for new water and new jobs for Southern California. She's the ranking member of the House's Natural Resource Subcommittee on Water and Power. Before I bring her up, I want to recognize a couple other electeds in the room. Representative Alan Lowenthal, right here. Representative Jim Costa. From the Los Angeles City Council, Paul Krikorian and Bob Blumenfeld. From the City of Brea, Councilmember Ron Garcia. And from the Office of Governor Brown, we have Katie Wheeler-Matthews. I think that's everyone on that list. Now, I would like to introduce Representative Napolitano to give you a few welcome comments. Representative.
Notice you said few. Thanks, Gary, and it is a pleasure to have all of you here in Washington. And may I add that you ought to have the same discussion in Southern California. And I would trust that you would do it, and I'd be happy to attend some of those sessions, because I think we need to be able to expand the knowledge and share information so that all of us are on the same page in terms of what's happening here, or what you need, that we need to understand. Thank you for being here, and to Metropolitan Water for co-hosting and being the lead on this, putting the briefing together, and to Gil Ivey, that we've known each other for many, many years. Bringing the agencies to the table, and Mike Hunter, again, congratulations, sir. He's been a great help in many of the things that we've been accomplishing. And I've got to tell you, there's some of you here that know me for a long time, but one person who's been in my house probably for about 18 years on Christmas doing a Santa sleigh is my quesadilla man, Ron Garcia. the honor to come to my house and make quesadillas for my guests, about 100 of them. But what I need to be able to ensure is that you continue informing and educating not only the members of Congress from the LA area, Southern California, and Northern California, but also their staff. Because don't forget, we're not always able to meet with you or to have all the information that you have for us. So please, please understand that you've got to talk to our staff. Engage in the discussion of the drought emergency that impacts Southern California. And I did have a conversation with Senator Feinstein over her bill, and of course we've met with Joaquin from Senator Boxer's on what she may include in her bill that we may be able to infuse into that the wording or the areas of concern in Southern California. And I did remind Senator Feinstein that Southern California is part of California. So we need to be part of the solution to the drought, because we too are affected by drought. Whether it's the catch basin cleanup and the removal of the silt in the dams, to protecting the watersheds and everything else that you have all been working on for a long time. We need to have you ask questions. And you let us know what those answers are, so then we may be able to work with those agencies. We need to continue to drought-proof our areas and continue the success of California. I don't know how many of you read some of the articles that have been published recently about the great job Southern California has done in addressing drought, and what Northern California needs to learn of what's happened for the last 3 decades in Southern California to do just that. And it's because of the work that you have done, so you need to applaud yourselves for that work. Thank you. We're not out of the woods. They're projecting that hydrological changes may bring more drought changes on next year. But we need to ensure that conservation, water smart, Title 16, my baby, increases from the 21.5 to maybe a couple of $100 million to be able to do the $400 million in backlog that they currently have. Mr. Connor? Title 16, my old bang.
A core part of the Bureau of Reclamation mission.
Yes. I understand that when I served about 10 years ago, it was not part of their core mission, and I made sure that they remembered it in their core mission and their goal. But they have been exceedingly helpful. We want to let you know that tomorrow we'll be introducing our Secure Water Act reauthorization. And then, of course, the 745, the desalination bill, reauthorized into Senator Boxer's legislation. We've outreached to cities, to regional water entities for the list of shovel-ready drought-proof projects that create new water and create new jobs. We want to be prepared when the state and the feds both, especially the state, releases their $220 million in Governor Brown's legislation. And we've been in contact with Speaker Perez, with CDFI, the Community Community Developed Financial Institution, as well as the California Infrastructure Bank, is how can they help small entities when they have projects that they need support in funding. The creation of water reliability for industrial, municipal, commercial, and agricultural use. We've got to increase the investments for our long-term solutions, and that is something that you can help us with as business. Please request members participate in the legislation, tell them how critical and important it is to business, because without water, business does not prosper. We want to continue the discussion and love to be able to have some input from you on what you feel and see and hear that we need to know in Washington to be able to either put input into policy or into those areas where we may be able to have something that's going to help our Southern California folks. We want to add this one, which you have, and I appreciate that. We want you to partner, to cooperate, because as you well know, in Washington, regionalism works. It isn't just one entity, it is people doing many things. And one last thing I wanted to let you know, and it has nothing to do with water, is that we're going to be doing an international trade export seminar free, that we invite all businesses who have product or want to find a new, buyer for your product in some other country. We'll let you know when that will be. We want to ensure that you understand we're here to help out. My staff, most of you already know Joe. Where are you, Joe? My legislative director back there. does transportation, and Jen Silva, who does water. So you please, whenever you have any questions, would love to have you outreach to them, and they'll get the word to me. So I thank all of you for being here. This is not only a first, but it's a great beginning, and I assure you that if you have any more, I'll be happy to get involved. And thank you so much to the Chamber of Commerce and to all of you. And Metropolitan Water, thank you.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. Let's give Grace Napolitano, who's a real champion of water. So my name is Jeff Keithinger. I'm the General Manager of the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. Thank you all for coming here. The way we're going to do this is I'm going to just sort of set the stage. We're going to ask each of our speakers to come up and talk very briefly, 5-10 minutes, and then we're just going to have a conversation here. But the two topics we're going to be talking about is the current drought in California, what's being done about it, and the long-term solutions that are being discussed, in particularly the Governor's Bay Delta Conservation Plan that we've been working on in partnership with our federal partners to try and bring that to some form of conclusion on that. But before I really get started, I also wanted to mention some people in the room that weren't mentioned, and they are my directors on my board, so very important for me to mention that. So we have Laura Friedman representing Glendale, also on the City Council, Cynthia Kurtz representing City of Pasadena, John Murray representing City of Los Angeles, and Val Wunderlich representing City of Beverly Hills. So, Metropolitan is the regional water wholesaler for Southern California. We supply about a little more than half the water to 6 counties. And if you see in those packets of materials, they've got a map. It's where Southern California, it's 5,000 square miles is our service area. It's the counties of Ventura, Los Angeles, Orange, Riverside, San Bernardino, San Diego. Those 6 counties, less than 1/20th of the entire space of California, is 19 million people. It's 1 out of every 2 Californians. It's more than $1 trillion, close to $1.2 trillion a year. So it's about 60-some% of the state's GDP. So a real regional powerhouse, also very proud of it. Also want to acknowledge, coming in there, Congressman John Garamendi. So we are gripped with a very serious drought here in California. It is primarily, the impact is being felt very heavily in the agricultural, rural areas, the Central Valley of the state. One of the reasons why it's not felt so much in Southern California is the long preparation that agencies like Metropolitan have put into preparing for droughts. We prepare for multi-year droughts. We have water in storage just for these occasions. We have planned and built up our local water resources. We have done marvelous things in conservation. We've actually reduced demand in Southern California over the last 20 years by 20%, while we've added 5 million people. So we have worked hard at this. We've invested as a region $12 billion. We never say drought-proof because there's things we just can't handle, but we always have drought-hardened our area, made it much more drought-resistant. But this drought here, this one's pretty impressive. This one is for the first time ever, we have a 0 allocation on the State Water Project, one of Metropolitan's 2 main sources of water. We have some City of Los Angeles representatives. In a typical year, Metropolitan supplies about 50% of Los Angeles' water. And this year, it's going to be close to 80%. There's no water coming out of the Owens Valley. The groundwater basins are dried up. Typical year of rain in Los Angeles, 18 inches. This past year, 5 inches. So when you do that, you don't recharge the groundwater basins, you don't get snow in Owens Valley. Everyone comes to Met, and Met becomes the regional provider. So a very, very challenging year in California, and it's going to have some pretty dire consequences in the Central Valley as it plays out over the summer, and then that'll have ripple effects to all our urban areas as we move forward. What I wanted to do is introduce our 3 speakers and then have them come up shortly. We'll start with, I was about to say Commissioner Mike Connor, Deputy Secretary confirmed Mike Connor. His confirmation is great news to all of us in water. He's a Westerner, New Mexican. Long time worked here in the Senate, in the U.S. Senate, special counsel, commissioner, and now deputy secretary. I mainly do Mike, but working on Colorado River issues, and I always said that was easy. We have 7 states, 10 Indian tribes, 2 nations, and you get a lot more consensus there than intra-California politics. So welcome to Delta and intra-California. Jay Jensen is a very long title of responsibilities, but I know him as working for the Council on Environmental Quality, works on land and water issues, and CEQ's got that unique mission of corralling all the federal agencies and keeping them on track. So we'll hear from him on how that's working. And last, Janelle Veland, Undersecretary for California's Resources Agency, working very closely with John Laird and promptly a full-time drought relief response effort. So we'll hear a lot from you details about the drought. So with that, I'd like to have Mike come on up and address the issue from the federal perspective, what we're doing right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. I very much appreciate I guess this is the first full week on the job in my new role as Deputy Secretary. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to old friends and folks in the water business because it's a more comfortable area than maybe tomorrow when I'm addressing folks at the American Petroleum Institute. So I'll spend the afternoon frantically getting up to speed on a lot of issues that are just as urgent for our country, just as complicated, but ones that I'm less familiar with from working on, that I've basically had the luxury during my tenure in the Senate and my tenure certainly as Commissioner of Reclamation, working on these issues on a daily basis and working with all of you on all the many array of different issues that come about, which I want to get to in a minute because the issues are ever evolving, and as Jeff pointed out, they've evolved this year with the drought in a way that we've never seen before, so we're operating at levels and making decisions that we've never had to do before. But first of all, I want to acknowledge the great working relationship that One Reclamation has long had with the Metropolitan Water District. Great collaboration. I do want to talk a little bit about what we've been doing on the Colorado River because I think it is a model. And there's a lot of actions that have yielded great benefits even in a drought year like this. But also, of course, I want to acknowledge the great working relationship and open lines of communication that we have, that I have, and I feel like I have had for several years now with Congresswoman Napolitano, particularly in her leadership on the Water and Power Subcommittee, the Natural Resources Committee in the House of Representatives, which has been a great value to move forward a lot of these issues in a very constructive and productive way, particularly in the area of Title 16. Congressman Costa, who Jim took off, who regularly makes use of the all available electronic devices to advocate for his views and his thoughts, which are very thoughtful. Obviously, Jim has a lot of experience in the water area, and Congressman Garamendi, who I also, on many levels, as a former Deputy Secretary of the Interior, I appreciate Congressman Garamendi's experience and value, and I would probably tap into that some if he's willing, but in the area of water resources policy, he's got a wealth of experience. We had a conversation this morning about those issues, and certainly we want to continue to work closely on all issues important to the Delta, too. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here with all of you. On the drought, as I mentioned, we're facing unprecedented circumstances with respect to operation of our facilities that we at the Department of the Interior are responsible for, but also in conjunction with this great working relationship we have with the state of California, not only because we should, but because we absolutely have to stay very coordinated in order to make the best decisions possible this year. So I think we've transitioned. I think Janelle's going to talk a little bit about the hydrology and where we're at today, and they do a great job every week of providing us a drought update that marries up with the information that Reclamation produces on a weekly basis. We're facing still, it may not any longer be with the 2 recent storm systems that came through, and unfortunately I don't think I see anything in the 10-day forecast. But with those two storm systems, we may be out of the worst ever year, the comparison with 1977, but we're still pretty darn close. And in the upper part of the system in Northern California, we're still operating at levels, as I mentioned, that we haven't had to operate before. Jeff mentioned the State Water Project getting 0 allocation. Reclamation's Central Valley project, water service contractors are at 0 allocation right now. A lot of the senior water users on the Sacramento River and the exchange contractors south of the Delta and refuges also are a fraction of what they normally get in a drought year, and that's unprecedented from our operations. Given that, we are obviously very concerned about management of the Delta and particularly salinity control in the Delta. That's one of the fundamental issues that we're grappling with as we not only deal with that right now, but look out towards the end of this year and try and ensure that we can maintain salinity control so that we can keep providing whatever water is available without bringing saline water into the system through our pumping operations. So that's one of the areas that we're certainly looking at. We have to manage the system this year to look out not only through the balance of this year, but into next year. How do we ensure that we can provide water for human health and safety purposes moving forward? We have to constantly use the latest information with respect to hydrology in our forecasts as we make decisions related to operations right now. And then finally, we've got to maintain some flexibility and balance in our operations. There's great value to providing some water, whatever we can for agricultural purposes, for refuges. The environment is taking a hit as well as water users taking a very significant hit. So the economic hardships, but also in the agricultural sector, there are concerns in the M&I sector, and also there are people dependent upon the ecosystem for making their living, and so we're trying to keep that balance in mind as we move forward. A couple of things I want to touch on real quick, which we can get into more in depth, is one of the questions posed or subjects posed was, what have we done to prepare for the drought that we're in right now? And it's a different story when you look at the 2 primary basins that you folks in Southern California in particular are focused on, the Colorado River Basin and the Bay Delta system. But there's been preparations and a lot of work done in both basins. In the Colorado River system, first of all, let's recognize the difference in the infrastructure we have. We've got, just on the Colorado River main stem itself, we've got 50 million acre-feet of storage available to us when the current 14-year drought, and maybe we're, I guess the most recent projection on most likely runoff forecast of Lake Powell, which we base a lot of decisions on, is we're about at 100% of average. So this year may be an average year in the middle of a 14-year drought in the Colorado River Basin, where the vast majority of those years have been significantly under average. But we started this 14-year period with those reservoirs full on the main stem, about 50 million acre-feet of water. We are now down to about half of that on the main stem. We keep taking actions, whether it's under the 2007 record decision on coordinated operations and shortage sharing, which created incentives for conservation. We keep putting more water in storage in Lake Mead to minute 319, our agreement with Mexico. We put in additional water, so in the last 7-8 years we put in 1 million acre-feet, 10 feet of elevation in Lake Mead. And that certainly is helpful, and that certainly has helped provide reserves for this year, but obviously we need to do more. In the Bay Delta region, we've only got about 11 million acre-feet of storage capacity, 11.4 million acre-feet of capacity. Those reservoirs are about 45% full today, so we've got a lot less flexibility in that system. We have a lot more operating obligations associated with the State Water Project and the Central Valley Project. And so while there's been lots of conservation in certain areas of the system, and certainly I think people have looked at other alternative sources, not just the project water. They've looked at their groundwater ability to make use of sustainable groundwater supplies. But the system's been so under such pressure as of late. Those groundwater reserves are rapidly depleting. We're having some sightings for water quality issues. We've got less in storage, so no matter what we've done with respect to conservation and diversifying those sources, obviously we need to do more, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. So that's the picture. A lot of good work, but the projections in this year are just indicative of the challenges in front of us. The other aspect I want to talk about is BDCP, but we can engage in that a little bit more in the Q&A session. I would just say on BDCP, we think at the federal level, we're working very closely with the state. We agree with the overall notion that the system and the infrastructure we have right now is not sustainable from an economic or an environmental perspective. It is a system that was designed for a population that is about half of what it is today in California. So we're going to continue to work on the BDCP. We think it's one aspect of a very comprehensive strategy overall to address California's water resource issues, the co-equal goals, which we are equally committed to at the federal level. From that perspective, we look forward not just working on the BDCP, but obviously a lot of the strategies in the governor's state water action plan. And with that, I'll let my other colleagues, Jay and Janelle, who have a lot to offer here, take the stage, and then I'll be ready for questions. Thanks.
Good morning, or good afternoon. We're at that point in the day. My name is Jay Jensen. I'm the Associate Director for Land and Water Ecosystems at the White House Council on Environmental Quality. Jeff had it right. It's terribly bureaucratic as a name, but essentially what that entails is I get to advise the chair of the Council on Environmental Quality, who is the President's Principal Environmental Advisor. As we start off, I just want to quickly just give some thanks, particularly to Congresswoman Napolitano for bringing us here together. These issues are terribly important. And as well, recognize, we've heard already that the members of the delegation that are here, Congressman Garamendi, Lowenthal, Costa, and others, the delegation that you all have is a really powerful one in the state at large. It's really helping drive these issues forward and get to some solution and resolution. I'm really excited to be here for two reasons. One is I'm actually a native Angelino, and I don't often get to talk to some of my brethren, so to speak. And so I'm really looking forward to the dialogue and exchange here. But two, I also am excited because the issues that we're dealing with are tough, but there are solutions out there. And one of the messages and one of the real reasons why I'm here is to let you know that we're working hard on those. The President is paying attention to these issues, and the White House is pulling behind it and working to get everyone organized and make sure that the solutions that can be as best as they can be as we move forward. So let me again go back and acknowledge what your delegation has done here, and they really have led the way on a range of environmental issues confronting California's communities and our country as a whole. From the beginning of this administration, protecting and promoting clean and abundant water has been a top priority. We've taken comprehensive action to ensure the integrity of the water that Americans rely on every day for drinking, swimming, fishing, and to support farming, recreation, tourism, and economic growth. As we all know, California is facing some tough challenges regarding water resources and unprecedented drought conditions. We're brought together today by a crisis, one which is unfortunately a harbinger of things to come, and as we enter a future of increasingly dry conditions in the West. But there is much we can do if we all work together and focus. And this is one of the reasons why the President went and visited California and the Central Valley and Fresno last month to draw national attention to these issues. While this drought is a reality, and future droughts are sure to come, more are to come, how we respond to drought and how we prepare for drought is entirely in our own hands. And that's why I'm here today, and why I look forward to this dialogue with you about how the White House, federal, state, and local leaders can, and how we all can work together to prepare Southern California to endure, to thrive in a drier future. So today I'll provide a quick update on how the federal government is coordinating with the state to respond to the current drought in California. Provide an overview of the administration's larger drought response with its new National Drought Resilience Partnership that supports communities in building long-term preparedness. And then also share with you some updates on the Bay Delta Conservation Plan. First, I'd like to start with acknowledging the really tremendous work that the governor, Governor Brown, and the state of California is doing on the drought. California has always been on the forefront of planning for and addressing its environmental challenges, and has often served as an inspiration for those of us in Washington who are trying to advance similar work on a national scale. We see a particularly vivid example of this happening right here in Los Angeles, and Jeff, I think, alluded to it on the start, but because Los Angeles and the Met has invested in the planning and built the infrastructure that's needed ahead of this drought, the situation in California in Los Angeles right now is not quite as dire as other parts of the state. Whereas the northern part of the state is actually under some mandatory restrictions, the southern part is in a much different situation, in large part thanks to Los Angeles and Jeff and leaders of Southern California. So this type of investment showcases the benefits of how focusing our efforts on resilience and preparedness, which is are important and are a key goal of the President's Climate Action Plan. And that's why the President has directed all the federal agencies across the board to take a hard look at their policies with an eye toward weaving climate resilience into everything that they do. This includes modernizing our land and our water policies. In this context here, the 2012 drought was the most widespread drought in over 50 years in the country, affecting more than 2/3 of the continental U.S. It cost the economy nearly $60 billion in agricultural sector losses alone. This is on par with the Sandy storm and recovery efforts there, and severely handicapped Mississippi River navigation, spurred record wildfire season, and had widespread impacts on energy generation and water supply. While there has always been debate about whether a specific storm or drought reflects patterns of climate change, we know with certainty that changing temperatures influence drought in several ways. Rain now falls harder and faster, so more water is lost to runoff. More of the precipitation in the mountains is falling as rain rather than as snow, so rivers run low earlier in the year than they would normally. And with an average increase in temperatures, soil and reservoir storage are losing more water to evaporation every year. In response to California's drought crisis, the White House, and working closely with Governor Brown, are working hand in hand with state and federal agencies, holding weekly and sometimes daily conversations about how to put attention and focus on water operations, but also on assistance that's going to be needed for the drought. We're looking at ways to move water and look at transfers and exchanges where needed, providing operational flexibilities to store and convey water where needed, and delivering projects that can help stretch California's water supplies into the future. We're working hand in hand with our state agency colleagues to provide relief and support of those who have been affected as well. We need to provide that operational flexibility to ensure the health and human safety, and we can do this all while still protecting our critical environmental resources. Now, as we ramp up our efforts in the short term, we also have to do a better job of preparing for these kinds of events in the long term. In November, the administration launched the National Drought Resilience Partnership to help communities better prepare for increasing droughts and reduce impacts on families and businesses. The partnership is working to make it easier for communities to access federal drought resources. There's actually a phone number, one phone number that anybody can call to get drought help and assistance. And they're also helping with getting communities to have better access to drought resources through drought forecasting, and with help in trying to get better drought resilience strategies and plans tied to specific sectors like agriculture, municipal water supply, energy, recreation, tourism, and manufacturing. Now, it's important to note that even in today's divided Congress, we are seeing strong bipartisan recognition of the importance of this kind of work. I'm pleased to say that last week the President signed the reauthorization for fairly unknown but and a fairly bureaucratic sounding program called the National Integrated Drought Information System. This program actually provides really vital drought information, helping communities to get the information they need to make decisions and businesses to make the investment decisions they need to know where they're going in the future. Happy to say that program is going to be authorized through 2018. It is really a foundational part of our ability to plan and prepare. And another encouraging sign is that it isn't just California that is clamoring for this kind of science-based preparation for climate change and to deal with drought. 2 weeks ago, the president met with a bipartisan group of 8 Western governors in a situation room about how federal and state and local partners can work together to build a long-term preparedness and build community resilience to drought. Those conversations were very productive and are ongoing, and we expect to see bigger things to come. Now, turning my attention a little bit to the Bay Delta, when we talk about building long-term resilience, we also need to recognize the importance of investments that need to be made to improve water supply, water quality, and the ecosystems from which the water comes. And that leads me to talk a little bit about the Bay Delta Conservation Plan. I know my panel colleagues will go into more depth, and they already have. But I'm here to convey to you that the administration has been and continues to be committed to a comprehensive suite of actions necessary to promote a sustainable, reliable water supply and a restored ecosystem to serve the people, the economy, and the environment of Los Angeles and all of California. In support of the recently released California Water Action Plan, the federal agencies released a white paper called Federal Investments in the California Bay Delta Region, which complements the state's plan and represents a comprehensive picture of all the federal government's investments in delivering clean water to Los Angeles and the state. Central to this effort is the Bay Delta Conservation Plan that the state has put forward and that the federal agencies are looking hard at right now. The draft environmental impact statement, which is open for public comment at this point in time. It's on the street with comments due June 13th of this year. And as you know, there is an urgent need for a comprehensive strategy to reduce reliance on and restore the ecosystem of the Delta for meeting California's growing water demand. And this was a fundamental conclusion of the Delta Vision process that was incorporated into state law through the 2009 Delta Reform Act and iterated in a recent National Research Council report. There is much to gain for Los Angeles here, as well as the state, by improving water management of the Delta. A new BDCP, if done right and done in combination with other water management strategies, such as habitat restoration, conservation, storage, all has the potential to give Californians a more reliable water supply and a restored ecosystem. The BDCP must provide for that reliable supply and a restored ecosystem, and it can be done. This is why it is important that you know how committed we are to finding a path for successful long-term management of water resources. And we all know that success will only be found where we're working in close partnership with the state, as well as impacted communities. The challenges in the Bay Delta are not unlike many other in the water and environment and climate change challenges we see. None of them stop at city, county, or even state or national borders. The state and federal integrated water management approach within upstream areas of the Delta and the Delta proper throughout the Central Valley Project and the California State Water Project embraces this holistic approach, centered on the fact that all water management programs and projects are interconnected. This approach promotes system flexibility and adaptation. In closing, I'd like to simply note here that California water has at times been framed as a zero-sum game. We've all been part of that effort during the last several years and last several decades to ensure that that's not the case. We're going to need your leadership, your pragmatism, and your creativity if we're going to thread the needle on water, on drought, and on climate change in a way that is more durable than what we've been able to do to date. You've got a federal team that's eager to continue our partnership with you and in tackling these persistent challenges. We'll look forward to doing that in the days ahead, and thank you so much for giving me a chance to share some thoughts with you.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for inviting me to be here today and to participate along with my federal colleagues and our fellow members of Congress. I'm sort of delighted to see so many of the congressional members here today. A little known secret of my, first of all, I'm Janelle Beeland. I'm the Undersecretary for Natural Resources for the state of California. Secretary John Laird is the Cabinet Secretary for the agency. And the agency encompasses basically all of our natural resources departments in the state. So we have the State Department of Fish and Wildlife, Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, otherwise known as CAL FIRE, the Department of Water Resources, which encompasses the State Water Project and our water delivery system, the Department of Parks and Recreation, the Department of Conservation, which is our oil and gas and mining and minerals, the Coastal Commission, the Energy Commission, and about 25 other boards, commissions, and conservancies throughout the state. So it is a large agency that covers a lot of ground. Lately, it's felt like we are pretty much ground central for the drought. Between the Secretary and I, we estimate every week we have to turn in estimates to our Office of Emergency Services on how much time we're spending on drought, and I think I was joking last month, but maybe not, when I said about mine was about 150% at this point. Because it is all day, every day, and I think in one of the visits that I had earlier with one of the offices, we were talking about the fact that this is an odd kind of emergency for people to understand what kind of crisis this is. Normally when you have a disaster or a declaration of emergency from a governor, it is something's on fire or something has collapsed or there's been an earthquake or a flood. So it's really hard for people to get their arms around what exactly a drought emergency looks like and what we're doing. And as I'm often telling people who ask for all of us that are working on a day-to-day basis to implement the governor's proclamation, it's really hard for us to come and show up as much as we want to and provide you the background for especially our different boards and commissions within the state to keep people up to date on what we're doing on drought response. But you're asking me to put down a shovel or a fire hose, basically, at this point, because that's what it's like. And if you think of it in those terms and if I listed out or showed you what we report on a weekly basis in terms of what we're doing under the proclamation, it would be a little easier if I could draw it all up here on the wall. But our agencies and departments are working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on this drought and on this emergency because of the severe nature of it and because there is a lot to manage. The State Water Project provides water to some portion of about 25 million people in California and 750,000 acres of irrigated farmland. And so there's a lot of responsibility there, and as Mike said, this is the first year in the history of the State Water Project that we have had a zero allocation, meaning we're delivering no water to contractors that are contracted with the State Water Project. And the same is true for the CDP, although I'm not sure if this is the first time. I think that you've gone to zero.
Stay at zero.
Yeah. I wanted to talk a little bit about the hydrology, but first I wanted to go back to what I was saying before. Before I came to work for the administration, I worked in the legislature as a staffer for 15 years. And so that's what I was saying about looking around the room and seeing a lot of the members here who are now in Congress that were in the legislature when I was in the legislature. So it's good to see all of you and as well as some of the staff people that I've run into in the last couple of hours that I've been running around. I am a little jet lagged. I got in very early this morning only to find out that I didn't have a hotel room. So it's been a long travel day for me. I do want to talk a little bit about the hydrology. Right now, basically, the situation that we find ourselves in is that everyone who relies in whole or in part on project water, farmers, fish, people, cities and towns, are going to get less water this year. There's less to go around, and we need to conserve and make some strategic decisions about what we're going to do with the limited supplies that we have available. And part of that management and the big task and what's keeping us all up at night and all busy all day, every day, is just what we're going to do to make sure. We don't know how long this drought's going to last. It could be over, by the end of the year. It could go through next year. And so what does that mean in terms of our water supply situation? And what things do we need to use the limited water supply for? Since the governor's declaration on January 17th, and this is now the second driest year on record we did with the recent rainfall, surpass 1977-78, not by much, but, and we're probably at the end of our rainy season here. We may get 1 or 2 more storms, but it's going to be 15 to 20 inches short of what we would normally get in an average year. And an average year not being a year where the 2 previous years were so dry that we have reduced our storage in our reservoirs. But there's a lot of demands for that water, not just for project deliveries themselves, but also because we have to manage the supply in a way that allows us to maintain salinity control in the Delta. So we have to be able to send some water out through the system to push back the salt water that naturally comes in from the bay. And we need quite a bit of water to do that with. Also temperature control and meeting Endangered Species Act and biological opinion requirements. And so there's a lot of balancing. And it's going to be hard on everyone. It's hard on the environment, it's hard on our industries, it's going to be hard on people. And what we are doing to manage that is the state and federal projects did a joint application to the State Water Resources Control Board. And that application was a recognition that beginning in February 1st, the standards that we would normally be required to meet because of biological opinions and court orders that would have kicked in would have required us to empty basically our reservoirs, send more water out to meet those standards, in addition to the water that we would normally send out and deliver. So in order for us to conserve water in storage, we made an application to the State Water Board that said we'd like to ease up on that delivery of water out of our system so that we can maintain some water in storage, so that we have some water to manage other issues that we may be seeing for the next year and a half, depending on how long this drought lasts. And so that is the situation that we're operating under at this current time, and probably something that you all are hearing a lot about from various parties on both the environmental side and the agriculture side, and also on the industry side, and our water contractors. And it is a big concern to everyone and all of us. But these decisions are being made in a way that provide us with the greatest degree of flexibility. Just last week, we worked with the concurrence of the fish agencies to relax. I don't know if relax is the right word, I wouldn't want anybody quoting me on that, but to provide some flexibility in the fishery standards that we need to meet in order to deliver more of the water that we're getting right now because of the recent rains and the runoff. So that is helping to increase some of the exports in that way and still operate within the law and within regulations. And we have been, as Mike said and as Jay said, been working really closely with our federal counterparts throughout this. One of the requirements under the board order is that we have a real-time drought operations team. And when I say real-time, I mean every hour we're on the phone together. Every day we're on the phone together. A lot of the time is spent in person in meetings. And so there's a lot of decision making that's going on a real-time basis, and including all of the monitoring that's going on. We have people out in the field who are watching fish and checking traps and making sure that we're making the right decisions, because one of the things that we learned from the past is if we don't make the right decisions, we can end up coming out of a drought with more new listed species, which in the long run make it more difficult to pump and move water because we'll have more restrictions on those, on the pumping. I think it was I forget which salmon it was that we listed after the '91 drought, but there was another species of salmon made it to the list that has complicated what would be a normal operational year. I do want to also talk about the snowpack. I mean, I think the big difference between where we were in 77 and 78, and even though we have had a little more precipitation than we did back then, we are at 33% of normal for our Sierra snowpack right now. And that is our state's largest reservoir. So we depend, everyone depends on, and water managers especially depend on the snow melt to feed into our reservoirs and for us to be able to use those for the various needs that we have and the requirements that we need to meet with the delivery of our water system. So it's a huge concern, and it is much worse than it was in 77. We do not have the snowpack, so we're losing about a third of what we're used to having for runoff in the summer, and being able to use that supply. I guess one of the most important lessons we learned from our previous dry years is that delay exacerbates the effects of the drought. So just like the governor has asked all Californians to conserve water around their homes, we're taking the same actions at the state level and the federal level on a much larger scale. We're making sure that that means that we're making sure that the state maintains its ability to protect the supplies that we have so that we have them to use for the various needs that we will have over the next year and a half. And as I said, these decisions are being made in a way that provides for the highest degree of flexibility possible. I want to talk a little bit about the Water Action Plan. I know, I feel like I'm sort of repeating some of the stuff that was said already. But it is the state's overall roadmap for how we're going to increase reliability in our system overall. It has 10 very key components. If you haven't read it yet, you can find it on the Natural Resources Agency website. It is only 20 pages. It's a good outline and foundation for how we're going to get through with conservation, recycling, storage, and conveyance. All of these things working in concert in order to increase the reliability overall of our supplies in the state. We are off to a great start with the Water Action Plan. The governor on March 3rd signed a $687 million drought relief plan, which accelerated a lot of the funding that we need to get the Water Action Plan underway. 549 million of that 687 million is Proposition 1E and Proposition 84, which are our flood and our integrated regional water management grant monies that are going to go to projects and investments that many of you in this room will be making in order to shore up your regional supplies. There was 30 million for the Department of Water Resources to improve water use efficiency and save energy and reduce greenhouse gas emissions from state and local water transportation and management systems. 14 million for groundwater management across the state, including assistance to disadvantaged communities with groundwater contamination. 15 million from the state general fund to address emergency water shortages due to drought. 13 million from the general fund to augment the state and local conservation corps to expand water use efficiency programs. One of the biggest pieces of the governor's proclamation was reduction by state agencies and all state departments and entities of 20% of water use immediately. And we're reporting regularly on whether we are there or not on a lot of this, on a lot of the conservation that was required. And the federal government followed suit when the president was out. He made an announcement that he too was requiring reductions in conservation at the federal level. There was another 25 million from the general fund that's being deployed to maximize federal drought assistance for providing food to those that are going to be impacted in agricultural communities and other communities due to the drought. We're going to see some job losses because, as I said earlier, there's not enough water for all of the needs that we currently have of the system. And then another 21 million for general fund for housing-related assistance for those impacted by the drought. Also wanted to mention that on February 10th, the Department of Water Resources announced an award of $153 million to help fund 138 separate water projects around the state. 35 of these will help communities cope with the drought in the long term. There is no simple way for us to create water right now, but what we can do is help along a lot of these projects and prioritize them and get things moving more quickly, take advantage of the crisis and see the opportunity there. And so that is what we're hoping to do with this drought package at the state level, and what we've been able to accomplish with working with our federal partners and the support that they've been giving us. I think I would just want to leave time for questions at this point, and just, I never go speak at any of these things anymore without reminding people that you really need to do everything you can in terms of conservation. During the last serious drought, we managed to get household and other uses down enough that we conserved over 1 million acre-feet of water, and we should be able to exceed that. We had less people. We have more people now. We could probably get a little farther than we did in the past. We do have a website that can give you a lot of tips and information. One of the biggest uses is outdoor landscaping, and so I know that a lot has been done, especially in Los Angeles, with regards to conservation, but we really need to do everything that we can be doing to save every drop, because it's going to matter into the future. And again, I appreciate you having me here, and I'll look forward to answering questions, and hope that that gave you a pretty good overview of kind of the current situation.
We have time for, I'm going to do a couple, Congresswoman, why don't you start?
Jay, you indicate you have a phone number for drought assistance. What is it?
I do. As soon as I said it, I knew I should have written down. I will get back to you on that.
Okay, because I'm sure everybody here would like to hear what it is. We'll pass it on to the water agency.
Absolutely.
And then, some of the companies have been doing a wonderful job. We can hear that, we know that, it's in writing. But we need to ensure that Northern California understands they too are part of the drought saving. And somehow, I don't know that they're doing the water meter installation, that they're doing the conservation, because they pay a flat fee. I wish we had a flat fee in Southern California. So whatever you can give to us, and by the way, please let us know when you're having something, especially CDQ, because I never hear of anything, especially when you're having meetings in LA, and I have to crash a meeting because I don't know anything about it. I mean, if we work together, we need to be able to communicate. Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman. I'd like to start with a question for Mike, and we're in the middle of the process where we're reviewing this Bay Delta Conservation Plan. It's 30-some thousand pages. We're trying to get some closure on it. Federal agencies have to do their part in permitting this process. So what's the definition from the federal side of a successful program? What are the things the federal government is looking for?
Well, overall, it starts with I think our primary guiding post with respect to the federal agency's involvement in BDCP starts with, obviously, the statutory requirements for a habitat conservation plan and the permittability associated with the statutory standards that we have. So that is the guiding post right now that certainly the federal fisheries agencies are looking at as they evaluate the plan, as we provide technical input into the plan. It's guided with that. Is this leading to a plan that can be permitted under our requirements, as well as we need to be equally cognizant of the requirements of state law? And I pause because that's the fundamentals, but there's so much more about what we're trying to achieve here. For reclamation, we are part of the process, given the interaction that the Bay Delta Conservation Plan will have with the Central Valley Project, and how it has the capacity to help firm up the water supply reliability associated with the project. And we certainly have an interest associated with that. We also have an interest overall in looking out, dealing with the water resources challenges that are coming up, and focusing on where we are with respect to water supply under our current operational criteria and infrastructure, and how that's going to decline over time given the projections of increasing temperatures, climate change and its various impacts overall, and some of the other risks that are associated with the current infrastructure, whether they be seismic, whether they be sea level rise. So there's a lot of programmatic issues that are of concern to the federal government, why we need to be at the table with the proponents of the BDCP, with the state, to try and get to, one, a formidable plan under the law, and two, addressing some of these fundamental policy goals that we have to increase water supply reliability, to look out in the future and help partner up with the state of California and all the resident communities in getting to a plan that meets those challenges. And then finally, I would just note that I think obviously one of our goals in this effort is to build more support for the plan across the state, and try and bridge the gap and do what we can to bridge some of the divisions that have historically existed and get to a plan that has broad public support.
Congressman Garamendi.
Thank you. First of all, to the Metropolitan Water District, some of this was talked about. The Metropolitan Water District really did what California must do, and that's prepare for the drought. And you did. 25 years ago, what, 300,000 acre feet of storage, now over 3 million, and you've got water there. The rest of California didn't do it. So first of all, congratulations to you and my colleague here who has for years talked about a source of water that's readily available, affordable, and in location. Recycling in Southern California. Thank you so very much for carrying that ball all these years. How many acre feet are available in Southern California for recycling? 500,000. Easy, maybe 1 million if you really stretch it. So you're taking water from Northern California to Colorado, cleaning it, using it once, cleaning it to a higher standard than the day it arrived and dumping it in the ocean. This doesn't make much sense, and this has been your speech forever. And I thank you, Grace, for doing that. The water action plan that the state put together lays out what we must do. I obviously have very serious problems with the BDCP. You're taking 150,000 acres out of agricultural production so you can put 150,000 acres into production or keep it in production to the south. We don't think that's a good idea. You build a tunnel that is 40 feet in diameter, 2 of them, that has the capacity to drain the Sacramento River. Literally drain the Sacramento River half of the year. There are environmental laws that would stop that. Those laws have been overridden twice here in Congress in the last 2 years. Wiped out all the environmental laws, state and federal. Gone. So that protection's gone. You now have an existential threat to the San Francisco Bay and Delta, the largest estuary west, on the west coast of the entire Pacific, from Alaska to Chile. An existential threat, because it's big enough to do it. $15 billion and not one new reservoir, not one new gallon of water. $15 billion. The California Water Action Plan talks about new reservoirs. We're introducing 4 new reservoirs here. I'm co-authoring those reservoirs. Sites reservoir goes in tomorrow. Metropolitan ought to think about using that as a storage facility north of the Delta. And it gives operational flexibility on the Sacramento system, which creates additional water supplies from the other reservoirs. There are ways we can deal with the California water crisis now and into the future. Take that $15 billion, recycling, conservation. NASA has developed satellites that are infrared and radar, and they can save up to 25 to 30% of the water on a row crop because they can tell when the plant needs water. Not when the irrigator wants to deliver it, but rather when the plant needs it. 30 million acre feet in agriculture, save 10%. Can it be done? Water Action Plan says it can be. And you at the Department of Interior have been working at this forever without any money from us. That's our problem. You should take that $15 billion and you do recycling, conservation, storage systems, aquifers, as well as surface storage. And you need a delta fix. You've got to have a delta fix. And the delta fix is a small facility. You put a 3,000 CFS facility into the delta, you can deliver water every day of the year. That's 2 million acre-feet to the pump. But under the present plan, you've got no place to store it. So you've got to have storage south of the delta. And under your plan, BDCP, you still use the delta as a source of water, and there's not one nickel in the BDCP to repair the delta levees, not a nickel. So you're spending $15 billion and half of your water supply isn't protected because you still need water out of the delta. My argument is, look at this thing holistically. Look at all of the options that we have available to us and spend your money wisely doing those things that create new water, and just as Metropolitan has done, preparing for the next drought. So a 3,000 CFS facility, repair your delta levees, keep them, you don't have to do all of them. An armored delta will work, taking into account the sea level rise. And you don't need to destroy 140,000 acres of prime agricultural land and turn it back into a marsh. You don't need to do that. But what you need to do is rethink what we're doing here. Pivot away from the big project to a project that's viable and creates new water. Now, what do you think of that? That's my question.
Just one quick comment. Congressman and I had dinner, I think, about a year ago, and he walked through his plan, and I could honestly say I agree with every single point in his plan except for the part about the Delta, where we agreed to disagree. But certainly, I agree with the rest of it. We need more conservation, we need more recycling, we need reclamation. We have to do them all. We need a Delta fix, we agree on that. The details of it, we're still...
Let's work on it.
We'll work on that. I'd like to ask Janelle. Janelle, you're here talking to a number of Southern California business leaders, as well as staff from a Southern California delegation and some representatives here. What's the administration, what would they like to hear from Southern California as they work through a California Water Action Plan, as well as the BDCP, given that Southern California isn't as energized usually as, say, the constituents in Mr. Garamendi's district?
Well, I think for one, we would like to hear more from those of you in Southern California, period. We don't hear as much from all of you as we think that we should, in support of, I'm asking for it apparently.
I didn't mean to put you entirely on the spot.
No, just ask the Mark.
And I think, too, that we need some additional input from our folks in Southern California. If there are things that you feel like we are missing or haven't picked up on, we do hear a lot from our Northern California Congressional delegation, and it does make a difference. We have made a number of substantial changes to the BDCP through this conversation and through these processes, and also through the public input process that we've had through the EIR, EIS. I mean, we started with a 15,000 CFS plan. We're down to a 9,000 CFS plan. We've reduced the acreage. We've reduced the amount of ag land that's going to be impacted. And so we are making progress, and we think we'll continue to make progress, and we want to have a plan that works for all of California. I think that we were long overdue in putting together an overall comprehensive plan to point out that this is part of a larger fix and not just a one-shot, one-trick that we're trying to do here. But the conveyance in the Delta is important, and it is important that we fix that and get it right. And we do need support, not just from Southern California, but also from Northern California, and we'd like to be able to work with those members to get there.
I was just going to add, I absolutely agree with Janelle. The BDCP plan has evolved a great deal, and it will continue to evolve as we move it forward. Before I saw Grace backing up, and I wanted to make sure I got this out there it is part of an overall comprehensive strategy. And this idea, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of acre feet of stabilized water supply through this whole process. But I do have to note that this year, through the Title 16 program, the water reuse program that Reclamation has been very involved in since the mid-1990s, we are delivering 350,000 acre feet of water through these water reuse projects this year. Of that 331,000 acre feet, and this is an annual supply, 331,000 acre feet that doesn't have to come from the Bay Delta, it doesn't have to come from the Colorado River region, that's in Southern California. Northern California, we're getting up and going, 20,000 acre feet this year, but we've got a potential based on the authorized projects to move that up to about 65,000 acre feet. And I should just note, we've got another almost 300,000 acre feet possible if we complete the projects in Southern California that are currently authorized, that just need some additional funding to do for. So big potential there. That's just another one of the tools, but it's a very important tool.
The 400 million in backlog, the 21.5 million budget at 4,16 is not enough money. So we either ensure we increase that. And to that, you might want to also increase look at the issue of dredging the dams in Southern California to capture more rainwater and be able to take the catch basins and clean them out so that we can collect some of the debris that comes in from the floods and the fires and cold in Southern California. And also include the possibility of funding the purchase of a super firefighter plane that's on lease to Southern California on a monthly basis. But we're going to have an increase in fires, and if we don't prepare, you're going to have more damage in Southern California. And with that, thank you.
I'd like to take one question. You've been waiting patiently, Councilmember Krikorian.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, everyone. On the City Council, I and my colleague Bob Blumenfield represent the San Fernando Valley, overlying one of the most important groundwater reservoirs in Southern California. And we, every year, here discussing the need to invest billions and billions of dollars in surface storage in Central and Northern California. And for a tiny fraction of that cost, we can do all of the things that Congresswoman Napolitano was just talking about. But if we don't have local storage to deal with our stormwater recapture, then it's kind of pointless. We can remediate the San Fernando Valley aquifer and recharge that for a fraction of the cost of that surface storage. So, Janelle, I'm pleased to hear that you mentioned $14 million for groundwater restoration and so on. But I can't stress enough how crucially important it is to all of Southern California that that reservoir be remediated and fully recharged. The LADWP is committed in the next 20 years to reducing its purchase of imported water by 50% in 20 years, after all that we've already done for conservation. And we simply won't be able to do that unless we have stormwater recapture that utilizes that aquifer. So I'd like to hear your comments on that. And Janelle, I look forward to working with you to make sure that that is a central component of any water measure that moves forward. We heard Senator Feinstein today talking about half of proposal going for storage and half of it going to Delta conservation. As long as that storage formula includes groundwater and a significant amount of it, that would be great. But it's centrally important in Southern California.
Okay, so to that I would say, again, I would point to the State Water Action Plan. We do have a significant section in the action plan on groundwater, and in addition to and in conjunction with storage, we see it as a multi-pronged approach. We're offering several tools, one of which is cleanup and abatement, speeding up those processes, addressing issues for locals that have difficulty in managing groundwater basins. So right now we've already launched that effort, and we're in the process of working with a large stakeholder group that is committed to providing us with the information that we need to understand what is needed to manage our groundwater basins and what tools do they lack that we can provide for them. And with the legislature, we put a pretty short deadline on it so that we can have an opportunity to move something through, perhaps with the budget process or the May revised and spring finance process, or before the end of session, so we can get some legislation in place around that. And the other component is going to be the state backstop, where communities can't or won't, for whatever reason, appropriately manage groundwater. We want to be able to provide and step in temporarily, not on a long-term permanent basis, to assist them and act as the backstop, because one of the largest problems that happens with mismanagement of groundwater resources is subsidence. And so not only are we not having enough storage right now, but we're also collapsing groundwater storage basins at an alarming rate in some areas. And so we lose that capacity forever once it's gone. You can't build a new groundwater aquifer. There are banking programs and other things that can be set up, but there is a very large section of the Water Action Plan that is dedicated to that, and I'd be happy to follow up with you additionally on what the administration is doing exactly right now.
Councilman, I just, music to my ears. When we talk storage, Department of Interior, we're talking about surface storage and groundwater recharge. And we're talking about investing in both areas. Certainly we're carrying out a lot of surface storage studies, as Congressman Garamendi made reference to. But just last year Reclamation invested $14 million in recharge projects as part of the San Joaquin River Restoration Program, because water management is integral to fishery restoration. But I want to also point out, so we probably don't give as much attention to it and talk about it as much, but we're starting to do that more, and I think we're on the cusp of doing it at a level certainly that we haven't seen before. As Jay mentioned, we had this amazing discussion with the President of the United States in the Situation Room a week and a half ago. Very focused on the drought is indicative of the challenges that we're facing, but it's an opportunity to talk about building resilience and understanding the investments we need to do. So I would just turn it over to Jay with respect to that.
If I could just add one tad bit more. The focus of the president on this is about resilience. And when you start talking about drought, one of the symptoms, arguably, of climate change, you start thinking about how you need to build your climate resilience. So this is a big part of the conversation about trying to figure out how we plan and prepare and get ahead. And all the ideas that have been mentioned so far are part of that bigger picture. Definitely groundwater storage on top of the other solutions that we've talked about here. And so there's dialogue and conversation with governors. It's ongoing, but I'd also draw attention to the president's budget that actually proposed a $1 billion preparedness fund. This is broad-reaching, many different sectors, but it is an important part of us thinking about how we get after our resilience at large in this country, of which we're talking very specifically of drought here and water. As well, I think, and let me add one last little bit to help guide that as it moves forward. The president also had set up a local leaders task force on resilience and preparedness. Mayor Garcetti and Governor Brown are on that task force. That group is working on its recommendations now. Towards the end of the year, they're supposed to come forward and set up those recommendations to the president. And we're going to have more and figure out exactly what that plan needs to be. So these are the ideas we're looking for and the reinforcement points that we need. And to Jeff's question earlier, I think understanding the success and experience that LA has had is an important part of us trying to figure this out, not just for California, not just for Los Angeles, not just for California, but for the nation. So please help us.
Thank you.
We're going to end it there. We promised everybody we'd be out at 1:30, so please join me in thanking Mike and Terry.